Good morning, everyone. Today is a very special day for our Cooking Without Looking podcast. We have an extremely wonderful guest on. We're honored to have her, Christine Ha, the season 3 winner of MasterChef. Welcome, Christine.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, well, we're so honored to have you. Let me tell you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your blindness.
Yes, I was born with full vision, and I grew up most of my life having vision. And then I would say now it's about half of my life. And then in my 20s, I started experiencing blurriness in one eye, and it turned out it was optic neuritis or inflammation of the optic nerve. Initially, the doctors were trying to diagnose me with MS, but it really turned out after several years of being misdiagnosed with MS, I was finally correctly diagnosed with something called neuromyelitis optica, which mostly affects the optic nerves and the spinal cord. It is an autoimmune condition similar to MS. And my optic nerves were constantly became inflamed over time in my 20s, and gradually they just atrophied because of all the inflammation, and that's how I lost my vision in my 20s.
Why did they think it was MS? Did you have any other symptoms, like you were having difficulties walking or moving your arms or anything?
Well, they said someone at that age that had optic neuritis, usually the all that is a sign that points to MS. And then about a year or so later, after my initial bout with the optic neuritis, I did experience tingliness and numbness in my extremities.
So what did you think at that time when this was all happening? What was going on in your life? How did you feel?
I mean, I was in undergraduate college at the time, and it definitely was not something I was expecting to encounter at that age. I think when you're a young adult, you think you'll be healthy or invincible forever. So
That's
it came as a total surprise, and I felt nervous, fearful, alone. None of my friends were dealing with serious health issues like this. So it was frustrating also not knowing for many years what I really had. And the MS therapy the doctors put me on were not working. So I continued to get a lot of neurological issues and attacks. And that was in itself was frustrating, not knowing what I had and being mistreated, I think, with the wrong therapies that did not help.
I was going to say the therapies might have even made it worse, right?
I mean, potentially, yes. I think sometimes I do think if I was correctly diagnosed sooner, perhaps I could have preserved more vision.
Now, what do you see, Christine?
Well, medically speaking, doctors say I'm counting fingers in both eyes at about a distance of 12 feet. So, I mean, I'm sorry, 12 inches. So people who understand that medical jargon would know. But for in layman's terms, for me to describe it to people who don't understand that sort of lexicon, I say that I compare it to coming out of a really hot shower and looking into the mirror, how it's very foggy and steamy and hazy. That's
Sure.
sort of my vision. So everything's just very blurry and washed out.
Okay, yeah, that's a little more understandable than what the doctors say, right? Oh my gosh. Well, I was reading a little bit about you, and that's normally what I don't do, but I was reading about you because it said that your major, you had a business major in college.
That's right. I went to University of Texas in Austin, and my undergraduate degree was in business. Yes.
Now, how did you get to cooking?
Well, I started cooking when I was in college, and at first it was out of necessity because I moved out of the dorms out of after my freshman year, so I didn't have dorm cafeteria food to rely upon anymore, and I moved into an apartment that had a kitchen, and I didn't have enough money to always eat out, so I had to learn to cook to eat and feed myself. So I started just buying cookbooks, and at that time I still had vision, so I was reading recipes and teaching myself to cook. And then I realized that I enjoyed it because there was, as I got better and I was cooking for my friends and my roommates, and I realized there was something very satisfying about being able to create something with my own two hands with raw ingredients and then making other people happy with something that I made. So then cooking became very much a hobby that I enjoyed. So on my free time, I would just buy more cookbooks, read through recipes, experiment in the kitchen, and just learn what I could learn about cooking. And it was simultaneously at this time that I started losing my vision as well. But I started cooking also, making it a goal to try to recreate a lot of the dishes that I grew up eating from my mom. My parents are both Vietnamese immigrants that came here as refugees during the Vietnam War, and so I grew up eating a lot of home cooked comfort Vietnamese dishes. And she actually died when I was 14 and never taught me how to cook or left any recipes. So as I got older, I realized I really missed the foods that she would cook. So I tried to start recreating her dishes or reverse engineering the dishes she made just simply by memory. So that was how I got started in just cooking. And it wasn't, my culinary career didn't really launch until, of course, being on MasterChef season 3 and then winning that season as well.
Right. So now, how did you decide to go on MasterChef? What pushed you into that?
Well, after I lost my vision and I and dealing with all the health issues I was dealing with, I decided to leave my corporate job and pursue a master's in creative writing because audiobooks and literature were kind of what helped me through those times when I was dealing with spinal cord inflammation and vision loss. And so I felt like books helped me through a really rough time, and stories helped me escape my reality temporarily. So for me, I've always loved to read and write ever since I was a little child. So I decided to return to what I loved and go to grad school for this. And then I believe as an artist or as a writer, you always try to experience as much of life as you can because it feeds your creativity.
Sure.
So I really just went on the show thinking that I would have some good material to write about. Of course, I was encouraged by my friends and my family to go audition for the show because they thought the fact that I was visually impaired but knew how to cook well was something interesting that the rest of the nation should know about and see on television. So I went at their encouragement, but mainly just to have material, creative material to come home and write about. So that's why I did audition for the show, not expecting to get as far as I did.
Well, that's wonderful. That's amazing. What did your family say when you got as far as you did and winning as well?
I think everyone was definitely surprised, very proud. Yeah, I mean, it was amazing and unexpected and surreal.
What were some of your most memorable moments on there? Because that is like really high pressured, high powered. I can't imagine myself even having sight being on a show like that. Honestly, Christine.
Yeah, it was very stressful. I mean, I think when people who watch or listen to it, it already sounds very stressful. And then people often, when they meet me, ask, like, is it as bad as it sounds or looks on television?
Yeah.
And I'm like, it is way worse because I think
Oh no.
you only get what they edit out. And I don't think people realize how long production days are and kind of what it feels like behind the scenes. So the challenges are very real, meaning we don't know what we're going to cook that day. We get the time that they tell us on television, or what you see on television. That's really only the amount of time we get. But these episodes that I was shooting for my season, each episode was 1 hour, but they were filmed over 2 days, and we were also sequestered from home, so we were living in hotels, and we are homesick. We're
Aw.
they didn't let us like call home because they wanted to keep everything under wraps and not reveal like what's going on. So we didn't have our cell phones, we didn't have our laptops, we really had no
Oh,
access to the
gee.
outside world.
You were like
So
a
if you
jury.
imagine all of that on top of the stress of the challenge and the competition itself, and you're away from home, and you don't know what's going on with your family at home, that on top of it, everything adds up, and it was very extremely stressful. But I would say, some memorable experiences was definitely learning the opportunity to cook so many different things using some of the best, most beautiful ingredients. And then, of course, not have, them, the production team having a culinary crew to clean up after you. So we didn't have to do our own dishes during the challenges. So some of those things that, looking back, it was very nice. And of course, meeting all the friends that I made in the competition as well.
Oh, well, that is nice. Now, let me know, did anybody like try and be nicer to you, go easy on you because of your visual impairment?
I mean, I think all of my co-contestants were nice to me. I think they all respected me. So sometimes it comes off on television like it was definitely competitive, but I would say like I got along with everybody in my season. I think people did respect me and treat me well and were nice to me. But of course, I was still a fellow competitor, so we were
Sure.
all very competitive. But yeah, I would say I think, and it's my attitude too, where I don't like to not get along with people or talk poorly about people. So for me, it was I did get along with everybody on my season.
Oh, that's great. So, tell us a little bit about, before we get into your cooking without looking recipe, tell us a little bit about, do you like to bake as well?
I actually don't love baking. The only thing I like to bake are cookies because I just love cookies myself, but I'm not a strong baker, as many people can attest to if they watch the show. But uh, for me, I'm not really a sweets person. I love more savory, salty foods, and I like the forgiveness of being able to how forgiving it can be to cook more savory foods because you can tweak the seasoning here and there. But with baking, it's often a very precise um, act of
They're
cooking, I think,
chemical.
because things have to be measured out. Yes, it depends on your humidity level in your house or the temperature of your oven, and just things have to be weighed out and very precise. And for me, I'm just not that kind of a cook.
Oh, well, yeah, I agree with you. I'm like that too. I'm not a big baker. My mom was. She was just like, she was very precise. Me, I like to, goof around with my food and play and try this and try that. Um, Tell us a little bit about, I think this is something we don't really know a lot about around here. A Vietnamese food. What is the essence of making a good Vietnamese cuisine?
Vietnamese food, what I love about it is the dishes are very balanced in terms of flavor, temperature, and texture. And it's very vibrant. So there's a lot of different vegetables, brightly colored herbs. Things often taste, I would just say it's very balanced. And of course, I'm biased since I grew up eating that. And that's one of my favorite cuisines. But I think it's about, I think a lot of the flavors, you've got your salty, your sweet, you've also, you're balancing like room temperature versus cold, and some things are warm, and then you can get all of these in a single bite. And then there's textures of things that are crunchy like shredded cabbage or pickled carrots, and then you've got like maybe more of the silky texture of things like pork belly. So I think what defines Vietnamese cuisine is the use of a lot of fresh ingredients in very balanced flavors and textures.
That's wonderful. What herb or what spices are indigenous to that Vietnamese
Well, we
food?
use a lot of fish sauce. Of course, that's one of my favorite ingredients. We use like a lot of scallions or green onions, some shallots, garlic, ginger. Spice wise, like we use star anise. You will like our noodle soups will often use like star anise or charred onion or ginger. We use cloves in some of our beef noodle soups, coriander seeds, and then there's a variety of herbs, like so many that I don't know all of them. There's just so many herbs that you can get. And it can be actually overwhelming when you visit a Vietnamese grocery store and you see all of these greens, and you don't really know what to do. But I always encourage like people to taste it. And there's just so many different flavors that come out of these herbs, and a lot of different uses for them.
I think there's a lot of room in the United States for more Vietnamese restaurants, because I personally have been to some, but I think that's something that we could we could enjoy seeing more of and learning more about the cuisine.
Definitely, definitely.
So tell me, describe your cooking without looking recipe for our audience today.
Sure. Well, today I chose not a Vietnamese recipe, but I wanted to go with something seasonal. So, of course, it's fall, and that season, I think of warm comfort foods that kind of give you a hug when you eat it. And of course, I wanted to pick a simple recipe for the audience as well, so that everyone can do it. So this for is for adults and children alike. But what I chose to do was a very simple snack or dessert of apples with caramel dip. So for me, I normally don't like caramel because I think it's too sweet, but the addition of cream cheese in this recipe and the fact that you're pairing it with something very tart like a Granny Smith apple balances everything out, and that's the key, like I said, to very good food like Vietnamese food.
Sure.
So this recipe is more of like a traditional American recipe, but it's basically making a simple caramel dip with the addition of cream cheese to add to that richness and creaminess of the dish and kind of balancing out the sweetness of caramel. And then, of course, the option to add different kinds of nuts. But, I know there's a lot of people with nut allergies these days. So that's, of course, optional. And then it's just a simple warm dip to dip your sour Granny Smith apples in. And I think it's a fun seasonal recipe that I often make for around the Halloween season or in the fall. So that's the fun recipe I wanted to share with your audience.
Well, thank you. And all of you listening, you can go to our website, www.cookingwithoutlookingtv.wordpress.com, and you can find Christine's delicious recipe. I noticed that it had the cream cheese, and that sounded so good. I would have never thought to put it in there. It's like I was tasting it as I was reading through the recipe this morning. So thank you for that. That's really wonderful. Well, you know what? You, outside of Stevie Wonder, you have been the person that most people who are blind or visually impaired who I speak with have wanted to have on our podcast or our TV show. What kind of thoughts do you have for the people who are listening?
Well, I would say, like, since I assume most of the audience is visually impaired or it's people who know someone with vision impairment, I feel like we're in this age, in this day where we talk a lot about diversity and inclusion. And I feel like people living with various disabilities or vision impairment, I feel like our voice can still be amplified louder. So I just encourage, all the people listening to, I'm sure you already have a community or a network, but I would say, like, be active in these things, seek out people who will support you. And I think the important thing is moving the conversation more towards and focusing more towards disability rights. I think is very important. And of course, with October being National Disability Employment Awareness Month, I think it's important that we talk about how things in the workplace can be adapted or how people can change their thought process in order to include more people with disabilities and vision impairment at the in the workforce and at the leadership table. And so I think that also translates to um, policy making and things. And so I advise people to be active and proactive in disability rights, and of course vote this coming November.
Oh, most definitely, most definitely. And well, that's part of the reason we're around. Our motto is changing the way we see blindness, and TV and the media have always been a wonderful way to just change people's mind on like a large basis, and to allow everybody in. I call life a party. It's like allow everyone into the party, and there's plenty of room for everyone, and we learn from each other so very much. What's on the horizon for Christine Ha?
Well, right now, I'm currently working on building out a full service restaurant. I'm taking my first restaurant, the Blind Goat, which is currently a 400 square foot station inside a food hall, and moving it into its full brick and mortar restaurant with a complete bar and a
Oh,
lot of seating. So
congratulations.
thank you. We're in the construction process. I think we should be wrapping up construction in about a month's time, and we'll be opening shortly thereafter. So that's exciting. And then been working on and off over the last several years on a documentary project that's been kind of telling my life story. So I'm the subject of this documentary. It's still an independent film, so we're still shopping around for a home for it, but it tells a story of my growing up, being Vietnamese American, having the parents that came here as refugees, and then how I got into cooking and lost my vision, and then eventually went on to open 2 restaurants in Houston. So that's been like a project that's been ongoing for a few years. So that's been, I guess, those are the 2 things that I can think of right now on the horizon.
So at the end of the day, Christine, do you think that your vision loss was an impairment, or was it actually a booster for you?
I think it's both. It can be viewed as both. Of course, like it is an impairment. Like, so I always get asked, if you could get your vision back, would you? And I said, well, I would like it back for like maybe a week, just so I can see what everything looks like nowadays and all my friends and my family. But I'm so used to now that I've lived about half of my life without vision, or almost half of my life. So I feel like I'm so used to it, and I don't think I would have gotten the courage to do a lot of the things I've done or accomplished had I not lost my vision and had to learn to be flexible and adapt to this and find new creative ways to go about doing things. So for me, I think yes, it is an impairment to a degree, because I really miss driving a car and I can't do that, but it did boost my self-confidence, surprisingly, and it took a while to get there, but it boosted that, and I think it boosted my belief in myself to be able to reach any goal I want to reach.
Oh, that's excellent. And um, first of all, tell us all of where your restaurants are. I know you gave us the Blind Goat.
Sure.
And,
I have 2 restaurants. Yeah, I have 2 restaurants in Houston. The first one is called the Blind Goat, and it's kind of like a contemporary Vietnamese eatery where we take street foods of Vietnam and comfort foods, and we do it in a modern setting. And the second one is called Xin Jiao, which means hello in Vietnamese. And that one is like a modern Vietnamese restaurant where we take a lot of local ingredients and cuisine types like Texas barbecue, smoked barbecue, and we infuse it into the Vietnamese dishes. So it's kind of like a marriage of um, just Texas and Vietnamese food, I would say. So both of them are located in Houston. We're on social media, and you can also follow me on social media as well to see what I'm up to. My handle is at the Blind Cook.
well, thank you so much, Christine. I really appreciate your time. I know how busy you are. Very excited to know that you're moving to a brick and mortar. That's very exciting. I'm so happy for you, and thank you for helping us change the way we see blindness. Have a
You're
wonderful
welcome.
day. Thank you
Thank
so
you. Bye, everybody.
much. Bye.